BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, and thanks for listening to the podcast of Saturday's Farming Today. I'm Caz Graham. In this episode, let me present the Farming Today Christmas selection box from seasonal flowers.
Among the dozen or so poinsettia growers, there's a lot of nervousness about committing to next year's crop.
To the price of Christmas veg.
8p a pack, I think does lead to questions about how people value the food that they're eating.
And who doesn't love a bit of a festive sing-song? Christmas carols, but with a bit of a difference, all coming up later. But we start with something that we've talked a lot about recently, and that is changes to the inheritance tax for farmers, because the figures being used by the Treasury to estimate how many farmers will be affected could be inaccurate because of historical advice given by HMRC, the tax office. That's according to the Central Association of Agricultural Valuers, who we will hear from in a moment. As we've reported, the government wants to introduce 20% inheritance tax on farm assets over £1 million from April 2026. This week, the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, was asked by a committee of MPs who the target of the change is, whether it's the super rich buying land to protect their wealth or family farms.
The purpose was to raise revenue in the budget, so it wasn't aimed at a particular group of individuals. Without going over it again, we inherited a really bad situation. We took the clear view that we couldn't hit the pay packets of working people, but we needed to raise revenue because without raising revenue we couldn't have done what we're doing, for example, on the NHS, massive injection into the NHS, much needed. So the driving purpose, if you like, was to raise the necessary revenue from a number of different places, including this, but it wasn't targeted at this group or that group. What we tried to do with the regime we put in place was to protect the family farm and putting in a high threshold for inheritance tax for farms, which means that if you take the figures on the estates for farms, the vast majority of them are unaffected by the changes we put in place. But we weren't aiming at a particular group.
Prime Minister Keir Starmer speaking to the House of Commons Liaison Committee. But the estimate he mentioned there for how many farmers will be affected by this change is much disputed. Farming unions say it will have an impact on as many as 3/4 of them. But the Treasury says data from previous claims for inheritance tax relief suggests just 500 estates a year across the UK will be impacted. Sir Keir was asked if he stood by that figure.
That is a robust figure. It's published by the Treasury, certified by the OBR. Currently, as I think you know, 73% of APR claims are less than £1 million, and 40% of APR goes to the 7% wealthiest claimants. And therefore, I'm confident that this gets the balance right between raising the revenue that we needed to, but also protecting most of the estates.
Now, the Prime Minister mentioned APR there, which stands for Agricultural Property Relief. At the moment, people can claim 100% APR on land, buildings and farmhouses, and 100% BPR, which is Business Property Relief, on things like livestock and machinery. Why is this important? Well, one of our listeners, Fred Mullin, got in touch to suggest that the disagreement over how many estates will be affected by the new tax could, in part, be down to inaccurate Treasury figures regarding these claims. He says, for probate purposes, farms would be valued approximately, with little or no value being attributed to livestock, feed stores, machinery, which would, in any event, be subject to 100% tax relief. That means, he explains, that many farms would be valued at 1 million or 2 million, when in fact the true value is closer to 4 or 5 million. So is he right? Anna Hill asked Jeremy Moody, Secretary and Advisor to the Central Association of Agricultural Valuers.
Yes, Fred Mullin is broadly right. The returns made by people claiming business property relief have, at the instruction of HMRC, been made on the basis of the balance sheet in their annual accounts, which are based on cost, not on the market value that the Inheritance Tax Act actually requires.
So are you saying that farms have historically been undervalued on paper?
For their machinery, their livestock, their silage, other assets and stores, yes. Not for the value of the land, the buildings, the dwellings, because those are almost always properly valued. But a dairy herd may well be on a substantially undervalued basis. A clamp of silage may actually never have been noticed for this purpose because it might not have been there at the balance sheet date. All these are matters that will now come out of the woodwork once we move, if we move, to a partial relief rather than a full relief.
How much difference is there in those valuations then?
I think the obvious and easy example is something like a dairy herd, where if it's been run by the farm for decades, that might have had a historic value of £400 or £500 a cow. That might now be 1,800 or 2,200 were it on market value today.
Just to be clear, has someone been lazy or negligent in not valuing the farm properly?
Well, the taxpayers have done what HMRC has said in its guide to filling in the inheritance tax reform they should do. So they have followed official government guidance. The Act strictly requires market value, but I assume here that HMRC has said this is the pragmatic way to save everybody time and cost and effort in a process where getting probate can take long enough anyway without needing something that doesn't alter the answer because there's been full relief.
So what does that mean then for the number of farms that you think will have to pay inheritance tax?
Well, it's individual owners of farming businesses that will have to pay. So it's not necessarily the business, but we see it, the number being 5 times the number that the Treasury have given out.
You must talk to politicians and maybe civil servants as well. Is there an understanding in the Treasury about the discrepancy here?
Well, we talk about the figures. The Treasury, we think, has simply not been able to get answers to the right questions that would allow a further debate to reconcile these issues.
And what's your answer?
Our answer is 75,000 taxpayers over a 30-year generation are affected by this before you think about inflation.
You brought this to the attention of the government. You mentioned it before the EFRA committee, the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Select Committee. Have you had any response?
Well, the EFRA committee was interested when I ran through the argument. We do continue to talk with civil servants over the figures. The government will obviously cling to its approach until it decides to change its mind.
Jeremy Moody. Well, we put his point to the Treasury, but we haven't as yet heard back from them. Now, there is one houseplant that seems to sum up Christmas, the poinsettia. Its bright red bracts or leaves appear on supermarket shelves throughout the festive season. As many as 7.5 million are sold in the UK every year, and around 60% of them are grown here. But growers say next year's crop is under threat from what they describe as disproportionate plant hygiene rules, which lead to crops being destroyed unnecessarily. They want the government to act. Wayne Eady is Managing Director of Volmery Limited in Cambridgeshire, one of the country's leading poinsettia producers. And he told Anna Hill that the problem is a pest called tobacco whitefly, or Bemisia tabaci.
DEFRA are particularly keen to keep this bug away from the UK because it can potentially affect, to a relatively small extent, tomato and pepper crops. Unfortunately, if there is anything above a very small tolerance, APHA can then issue what they call destruction notices, and they can effectively force us to throw away the crop.
How much of your poinsettia crop have you lost this year and in previous years as well?
This year, not so much, I'm pleased to say. In previous years, quite a lot. So last year, for example, we lost £185,000 worth.
And what does that mean for your business when that happens?
It's pretty devastating. The problem typically emerges quite late in the life cycle of the crop, so typically starts to show itself in September and October. By that point in time, you've pretty well sunk all of the money into the crop. So 80% plus of the total sales revenue is probably sunk into the crop at that point. If that crop is then thrown away, that's clearly devastating to a business's profitability.
And also, this is a seasonal crop, isn't it? So you've got staff there at a specific point in the calendar to help grow these plants for Christmas, I presume.
Correct. The main reason for anybody to grow a poinsettia crop is to retain core staff. If you run a seasonal glasshouse business where you grow bedding plants or any kind of house plants, typically there's a peak season during the spring. After that, if you can grow a poinsettia crop, you can retain a good number of staff through the autumn so that you retain those skills for the following spring. In our case, that's around 45 people that we would otherwise have to let go if we didn't keep the poinsettia crop.
These flies, though, they do pose a risk, don't they, to a tomato crop? So isn't it better to be safe than sorry?
Our point is that the risk is relatively low to tomato crops. Most tomato nurseries are located in places not near a poinsettia glasshouse and not near a consumer's home where there's any great risk. Typically when poinsettias are in circulation is when it's cold, and the cold will kill it. Our ongoing debate with DEFRA is why the rest of Europe, tomato industry, which is significantly bigger than the UK industry, and the poinsettia industries manage to coexist perfectly well.
So they don't have the same process of coming in and destroying poinsettias, say in Holland, where both of those crops are grown?
Absolutely not.
So what are you asking DEFRA Secretary Steve Reed to do?
What we would like to see is a new classification of the Bemisia, where it's a regulated non-quarantine pest as opposed to quarantine pest. The levels of risk from this specific pest are very low, and we think that the risk to jobs and the risk to margins on top of other current risks that we're all being hit with is massively disproportionate. If you have this problem in September and October, it's incredibly stressful and it's potentially incredibly damaging to a business. So among the dozen or so poinsettia growers, there's a lot of nervousness about committing to next year's crop until we know really where DEFRA are prepared to make any change to the legislation.
That's poinsettia grower Wayne Eady. DEFRA says a review of the quarantine status of tobacco whitefly was conducted last year, and the outcome included retaining its status as a GB quarantine pest. In a statement, the department told us, "We have strict biosecurity measures in place to minimise risks to the UK plant industry. We continue to engage with industry to best protect against this pest." And if poinsettias aren't quite your thing, how about a nice pair of socks for Christmas? What better? And to make it extra special, a hand-knitted pair. We talk a lot on this programme about the price of wool, and it is rarely a cheerful conversation. But at this time of year, high-quality British wool comes into its own. Knitters and crocheters can't get enough of it. They've been in full swing making Christmas presents. As Marie-Claire Carey-Jones discovered, real wool from local sheep is a winner.
Oh, that's amazing! Christmas Eve.
I'm Jenny Watts and I am co-owner of Ammonite Yarns in Pontyclean. We do several groups. We have drop-ins twice a week. We have a crochet-only group. Today we have a knitting-only group.
So what sorts of things do people create for Christmas?
Lots of people make socks. So we have a particular supplier who does British yarn only, and they do a Christmas sock yarn every year. Another favourite is chocolate orange covers. Just little things that you can make in an evening.
Hi, my name is Ruth Moore. So we're standing in front of your shelves and shelves full of different yarns, different colours, but you're passionate about natural yarns.
Yes, so we have British yarn that's made from wool generally, but we also try and carry cotton and alpaca and a variety of mixtures as well.
But wool is something that people often worry is going to be itchy and scratchy, but if we have a feel of some of these, it's really not the case, is it?
It's not anymore. So, I mean, we do have one or two from sheep breeds like the Jacobs that are a bit coarser, but some of them are beautiful.
And how important is traceability?
I mean, it is quite important to know that the sheep have been treated well and that kind of thing. West Yorkshire Spinners use British wool, and then we've got a couple of ranges from Laxton's, one of which is called Wool Trace, and on that one there's a QR code that tells you which farm the sheep came from.
And then this wool here comes from a farmer who's only down the road, Natalie Hepburn.
Yep.
And I've actually been to visit Natalie and her flock.
Here on this site we have pedigree Dorset Down sheep. We like them because they are easy to handle, they're attractive to look at, they do produce this amazingly fine fleece. We've got 2 alpacas, they serve as flock guardians, so they look after the lambs, and we use their fibres as well with our sheep's wool.
So what is it that you're looking for in a wool when you're thinking about purchasing your sheep and also the alpacas?
Wool comes in such a range. You've got your blue-faced Leicesters, which are the finest sort of wool you can think of in this country. And then you've got all the way through to sort of the Herdwick, which is quite a coarse carpet-type wool. We wanted to go for a breed of sheep where we could do a clothing range. So the Dorset Downs have quite a fine wool, quite often used in the hosiery trade, so for tights and things like that. Brilliant for knitted items like hats, scarf, gloves. You look at a sheep and you can see a jumper, can't you? You can see how it would fit you quite nicely.
Back at the shop, they're knitting jumpers and more. So, Sue, what are you making?
A mini Prosecco bottle cover. And I've just made a jumper for my grandson, who's 6, and that was in 100% wool. And everybody said he won't like it, he won't wear it, but he does, he loves it.
Nashua Bryant. I've been doing blankets for my dog, scarf for my dog.
So are you going to be making anything for Christmas?
The poor dog, again, is going to have a jumper.
That's Marie-Claire Carey-Jones reporting. You know, I knew my chocolate oranges were lacking. They need knitted covers. That's definitely on the Christmas list. Now, I haven't come across chocolate orange pricing wars this year, but the annual discount wars over Christmas dinner veg are just about reaching their peak. Last week, Tesco unveiled its offer. Club card members could get big reductions. For instance, a kilo of carrots for just 15 pence. They're usually 69 pence. Sainsbury's, Asda, Aldi and Lidl joined in, offering 2 kilos of potatoes, a kilo of carrots or half a kilo of sprouts or parsnips, all at 15 pence. Then Morrison's upped the ante, cutting its veg price to 10 pence, swiftly joined by Asda. Well, Lidl wasn't having any of that, so it cut its price for Christmas veg to 9 pence, only to see Aldi match that. And then Asda cut its price again to just 8 pence. Well, while growers acknowledge that this annual pricing competition between the big retailers can be helpful for hard-up shoppers, they're worried that this sends out the wrong message to consumers who may ask, if carrots can be 8 pence a kilo at Christmas, why do they cost at least 8 times that at other times of the year? Charlotte Smith spoke to Professor Jim Monaghan from Harper Adams University.
So how it works is the supermarket are buying at the contract price and then they are selling it at a loss.
So who's making money then out of this?
The supermarkets hope to make money out of this by increasing footfall. So if you can attract customers in by really tight bargains, they're then going to spend their money on other things as well as just the vegetables. They are not going to be making money from the vegetables, that's clear.
And who's losing money then?
I think it would appear that the supermarkets are making a decision to not make money on these lines for the 1 to 2 weeks that they're doing it. You would hope that the deal with the supplier is that they don't take a hit. Because if you look at wholesale prices, you're making a significant reduction on the value of the crop.
And that's the worry, really. Some farmers feel that this devalues, in this case, vegetables, because it makes people think that they can get them really cheaply.
Well, they're almost giving them away for free, and that's a challenge. Do we value things when they're at that price? Now, it's very helpful for people who are struggling to at Christmas to do their shopping, but it makes me go back to the days 15, 20 years ago when there was a price war on bananas, and people stopped valuing bananas, and we've never got that price back.
Would, though, a 2-week promotion at Christmas make that kind of impact, really?
I think 2 weeks at Christmas is not going to have that big impact, but it still sows a seed in a customer's mind. These products should be cheap.
That's Professor Jim Monaghan. Well, the Ulster Farmers Union says heavy discounting of veg by supermarkets in the run-up to Christmas risks undermining the sustainability of local farming by devaluing Northern Ireland's produce. Jack Ward is from the British Growers Association.
I know it irks quite a lot of growers to see the products which they have laboured over long and hard and invested in very heavily. It takes, between 6 and 9 months, depending on whether you're growing carrots or sprouts, to put these products on the on the shelf, and to see them reduced to 8 pence a pack, I think does lead to questions about how people value the food that they're eating. And it undermines, I think, the amount of effort that goes into producing food, in what is often difficult conditions.
How much do you reckon a supermarket is losing if it's offering a kilo of carrots for 8 pence?
I would think they must be losing, 45, 50 pence.
And that's fine, isn't it? If that's what the business decides to do, it's offering a loss leader and the supermarket is taking the hit.
Yeah, I think from a consumer point of view, it's fantastic. And in the main, it's the retailers taking the hit. But I think, at a time when food production, is going through some challenging times, and the cost of producing food, I think over the next decade is only going to increase. I think we need to be careful about the message we send and make sure that when people are loading up their baskets with all these fantastic offers, they just reflect on what the actual cost is to produce these things.
Jack Ward speaking to Charlotte Smith. Now, bar a supermarket veg price war, nothing says Christmas like a festive sing-song, belting out a few carols, perhaps in the pub. It's an old tradition said to originate in Yorkshire in the 19th century when people would go to the village pub to sing carols to the old tunes. Locals in the small market town of Bradford-on-Avon in Wiltshire are reviving village carols from Somerset, Wiltshire and Cornwall. Joe Pesey went along to the Dog and Fox to meet some singers.
My name's Chris Timpson. Me and my wife Anne had the idea after we went to the Sheffield carols of perhaps doing something similar in Bradford.
OK, Anne, so tell me, what are the Sheffield carols and what do they have to do with Bradford-on-Avon?
In the 18th century going into the 19th century, there were galleries at the back of churches for musicians and the choir. And at the mid-19th century, the church authorities had a big change of things, and they tore those galleries down, and they decided to completely change all the music, including the carols, of course. So they weren't allowed to sing those carols that they'd been singing. Some people in certain areas, especially around Sheffield, started singing them in pubs. And in Cornwall, they sang them in the streets. Singing the carols near Sheffield just continued from the mid-19th century right up till now.
And so you thought, we're going to bring this to Bradford-on-Avon, and you sing lots of carols from villages around Somerset and Wiltshire.
I did quite a bit of research into this, into local carols, and the nearest one I could find was Carlingcott, which Heather will tell you about in a little while.
And Heather, so can you tell me about the Carlingcott carol then?
Well, I live in Carlingcott. It's a very tiny village, about 7 miles from Bath. And when the Baptist chapel closed down, they found this handwritten carol, and the tune was called Carlingcott, and it was written specifically for our little village.
Hello, I'm Dinah, and I've been singing with the carolers for about 6-7 years now, I think.
And the last song we heard was the Nailsbourne Beasts song. Can you tell me a bit about the history of that song?
Yes, I was working as a reporter, actually, on Radio Bristol when I was a young girl, and I got to meet Ruth Tongue, who is a great folklorist who discovered this song, which I've never heard anywhere else from the Quantocks, about the little robin. And she claimed that this was passed on by the cowmans from father to son. And it makes a nice song, nice carol.
My name is Hilary. I play in the band. I already knew Chris and Anne, and they said to me, come and play with Christmas tunes. And I said, here, I can't do that, me dear, because I don't read music very well. And she said, you'll get the hang of it in a minute. It's just gorgeous. Everyone talks, everyone laughs. You sing, even if you cannot sing, and you know you cannot sing, you join in.
Well, luckily for you, I didn't join in that report from Joe Pesey. And that is it from us. I'm Caz Graham. The producer is Heather Simons. Farming Today this week is a BBC Audio Bristol production.